A long, long time ago, in a world far, far away, there was a group of prehistoric people facing a new challenge. A wise elder, known only as the Shwela, had tasked them to chart a new path for their people and address a rising need. They must not do what was done before. They should not discover that which was already discovered. They should not reinvent that which was already there. So, these brave cavemen and cavewomen came together and invented the wheel. This is their story. We have identified the tribe's biggest challenge and via our inspiration process have refined it to discover and address the human need. We are women and cavemen living in the year 10,000 before Christ. Our small tribe are facing many challenges in trying to survive in our dangerous environment with our limited technology. Our biggest problem, which we would like to address with a sense of urgency, is transportation. It's very frustrating. Every time we kill a large animal, we are faced with a huge problem to get the fresh meat back to our village. On our last hunt, we killed a mammoth 30,000 steps from our village. It took us over 3 moons to get back, and by then we had lost a large portion of the meat. Inspiration. The inspiration phase. How should we get started? We start by telling ourselves a story of our prehistoric tribe. And one of the tribeswomen, a young mother of 3, was sitting patiently with her kids, about to gather a fire when she saw a group of ants collecting food. Quickly, it hit her that her husband had been gone for long. He was gone to go hunting to put food on the table, and she asked herself if they could also collect a large animal to feed them for at least 3 days. That would mean spending more time with her husband and family, and still they would not starve. Besides, it was going to be winter soon, and it could be dangerous for the hunting parties to hunt that far away from their home. So the tribeswoman sat and wondered how she could be of any help to her husband and also serve the greater need of the bigger tribe. Only then she started playing with ideas and trying to imagine how they would gather this large amount of food and how they would transport it to the village. And so the latent seeds of creative human-centered design thinking was already present. All it needed was a spark. And so the interviewing process began. After thinking by herself, she started to consult with a bigger group of people. She gathered some of the village elders and some of the hunters to start a brainstorming session. She made the rules of the gathering very clear. The idea was to engage every individual with the needed empathy, to really listen, and so they were going to learn. Now, how do we keep people at the center of our research was a question the group faced. And so they came up with the idea of the talking stick. You could only talk once you had the stick, and each of the other members would have to listen to you then. And once a person was finished talking, they would put the stick in the middle of the circle, and then everyone else had a chance to react on what it was that person said, and to ask for clarity on their ideas and thinking. And only after everyone was on the same page, the same stone painting, they continued with the next person. And as the discussion progressed, they started identifying tools that they could use to understand people better. So in order to understand each other better, they used these 4 steps to start to frame this design. They tried to say what they wanted to do in a single sentence. So what we want to do, how would we transport a large quantity of food to the safety of our shelter in the smallest time possible? It should be done fast enough that the food doesn't spoil and that it doesn't attract predators, but it should also be done efficiently so that the least amount of food would be wasted. And thus, they came to ideation. In that phase of the process, they wanted to ideate and come up with ideas. This phase helped them with the following questions. How would we make sense of what we've learned so far in our brainstorming and conversations and interviews? How do we turn these learnings into an opportunity for design? And how do we then make a prototype? And how would we know if this idea is feasible, if it's going to work? So in order for the group to progress, the cavemen and women attempted to share what they had learned up till that point. They put their heavy loads the clubs and skull bracelets and meat on the ground, and sat in a circle. And they called this process heavy downloading. Then they started to get rid of all the distractions. And this was difficult because one of the members, Oog the Terrible, was sitting on a nest of angry red ants. But luckily, after he had applied the banana leaf ointment, the group were ready to continue. And so everyone got a turn to share information on what they saw, what knowledge they'd acquired, and what their experience of the event was. And then, when one of the members shared a good insight, every member got a chance to place a data, our word for stone, in front of the speaker. And at the end, the group started making connections between all the information that the group thought was the most relevant. They would place these stones in front of the speaker. But at this point, Oog the Terrible was confused and started asking questions like, "When eat? Me break? Oog angry?" These questions were not judged, but duly answered in their time. And it was good to share this experience of the group immediately after they hunted, because they were tired and needed to sit, but also because the experience was still fresh in their memories. And then, from this inspiration phase, they garnered new knowledge, helping them to better define and address the main challenge, transporting the food. At this point, Oog started throwing all the gathered data, all these stones, into a small body of water close by. And so the cave people named it the data pool. And as they sat there staring into the data pool, they started to reflect on the individual stories that the tribe had told. A lot of them had felt the same: hunt, kill, heavy, not safe, travel. And so the group started to work with these compelling insights that were heard over and over, and in the case of Oog, over again. And the consistent problem seemed to be the awkward weight of the mammoth carcass that they hunted. It was both heavy, and the shape made it difficult to carry and transport. Pulling it along the ground, it kept getting snagged in the underbrush and growth. And carrying the meat higher meant that it wasn't getting snagged, but the load quickly got too heavy for them to carry and they would have to put it down again. How do we carry it higher, but make it not so heavy? That brought them to the second step. Carrying it higher, not so heavy. How could they make something or create something that would help them in this situation? That brought them to the third step. They went back to the data pool and they started taking out the stones. And they started formulating ideas, and as they shared these ideas of possible things they could do, they started placing the stones every time they felt that the ideas were converging, that they were starting to move in the same direction. And the fourth step happened when Oog got angry again. He couldn't see the mind pictures everyone was talking about. And so one of the tribesmen took a stick and started drawing the pictures in the sand. So after everyone and Oog were sure that they were on the right track, Oog squared his shoulders and he pointed at his arched back, and they realized they needed to go through the process of discernment to engage with this data pool they've assembled. So they used the themes that they identified, they drew the pictures in the sand again for Oog, and they started to reframe these themes as short statements. Mammoth heavy, need safety, need travel, need heavy lifting, need carry higher, no sit on ants. They discussed these themes and decided that although not sitting on a nest of angry red ants was a good idea, it probably wasn't relevant to the challenge at hand. At this point, Oog pounced on a large yellow lizard dozing on a rock nearby and started to argue our current quandary with this yellow friend. The lizard did not respond well to the aggression and sprayed Oog with a foul-smelling liquid. It did not further the group's research per se, but it did teach them a valuable lesson about not picking up yellow lizards. The strange sulfurous smell of the lizard secretion started to take hold on the minds of these cavemen and women in the strangest way, and it started having a distinct visual effect on their imagination. The visual of the flying yellow lizard through the air also helped, but it sparked something in the group. Suddenly, the air was tingling with possibility. The colors were alive and they tasted the smells. And so they started staring at the mammoth carcass and saw that which they had not seen before. "We should build rocket ship and send meat back to home," one of the group ventured. Surely this was lizard speak, as they did not know things like rocket ships. But they did not judge. They listened more. They tried to keep an open mind to all possibilities. And the problem with keeping an open mind is that sooner or later, someone is bound to come along to try and fill it. We could tie the carcass to one of the flying pterodactyls and train it as a homing pigeon, another one of the group ventured. We could tie it to the back of a triceratops and chase it back home. But one of the group started playing with the data stones again. What if we were to roll it home? I like that, another member said. That's how we should roll. Let's build on that. And so they started playing with these stones. They started to use sticks and animal leathers to tie them together and create these strange, rolling, slowly moving machines. This will be called device to carry stuff along the road. Car. They started building prototypes of this idea. And they decided to build different types of prototypes. They're going to build this carry stuff along the road, this car, and then they were going to test these results of their prototypes individually. And after the tests, the group decided to examine the prototypes and ask the rest of the tribe for feedback. Feedback not only for when they got hungry, but also to understand better how they could enhance these prototypes. And that brought them to the final phase, the implementation. They started getting to that phase where they wanted to roll out this idea of the wheel. They wanted to answer 3 key questions. How did they plan for what's going to happen next? How did they make this concept real that they envisioned? And how would they continually assess if their solution was working or workable? So, the first phase, they kept getting feedback from their tribe regarding their design and the designing process. And then they built this live prototype and they launched it in the tribe. And this helped them to determine the feasibility and viability of the idea. On the last hunt, they'd killed this big mammoth. This mammoth that was so far away from the village, the 30,000 steps. And they remembered it took them 3 moons to get the meat back to the village. And so, this prototype was specifically built to address that need if they could use this to transport the meat at a quicker pace safely to the village. So, they built their car prototype, and after a few of the prototypes were built, they started testing them. They used 3 different materials, wood, rock and mammoth bone, in 2 different sizes, small and big. And they built a total of 6 different prototypes. And the result? All the small prototypes broke quickly under the weight. The 3 larger prototypes, they fared better. The rock and mammoth bone carried meat for 1 moon, but broke on the second rising of the sun. The wooden wheeled car carried its meat to the village before the second moon. This car cut out transport time in half. How would they further this concept and make it real? They needed to build partnership in their own tribe. They needed skilled artisans who could build these car prototypes stronger and better and improve upon it. And they decided they needed to get the right people in the right places. So the tribe decided to take their history and tradition seriously in this new venture. Decided to always sing songs and tell stories about what happened. The tribe were masters of storytelling. These stories helped to increase empathy and the awareness of it. It encouraged cooperation. It helped to move people and it helped people to remember. The stories were very powerful and they encouraged people as a call to action. And these stories were used to make their concepts real. Now, how did the tribe assess if the solution was working? After a long discussion around the fire, the tribe decided to share this idea with other tribes to benefit them as well. They realized that they could even negotiate with these tribes for important resources and food. The way in which they did this was to tell their stories of how efficiently their prototype worked. They presented and pitched this, and they used 4 steps in the presentation. They articulated the essence of the wheel, of the need for it. They brought their point across without getting bogged down in all the details, and they thought about the format. And as they sat around the fire, they realized that they could use a setting around the fire to showcase this idea. So using the fire, they created powerful shadow images on the wall by pointing out the spears. And they called this a PowerPoint presentation. And they communicated in the different languages of the different tribes to convey this idea and this radical new discovery that could help all tribes to move food faster from the hunt location back to their communities. And so, by inventing the wheel, These brave cavemen and cavewomen brought a gift to the world that benefited not only themselves, but all of humanity.